What's going on YouTube? This is SRS and this is like my first video in probably about a year that isn't just a beat or a song. Today I'm going to show you how I made like a dark melodic trap beat using just Loner's kit, New Layers Volume 1 kit, which I know he like advertised as an R&B kit, but you can do whatever you want I guess. And this is how it sounds. And that's basically the beat, or the main bulk of it. So basically I'm going to go step by step on how I made the beat, and I'll show you the effects I use as well. So nearly everything is from Layers, apart from I think just the synth bass isn't from Layers. I'll start with the pad. I'm using the glitter pad, which I'll solo for you with no effects. It's in D harmonic minor, and I played it on a MIDI keyboard, but I can't actually play the keyboard, so I just cheated. And with complete control you can set it to a scale, so no matter what you play it's going to be within the scale, so it's going to be hard to sound bad unless the chord progression just doesn't really work. But I just play until I find a chord progression I like, and this is what I came up with, and then I just quantized it and neatened it up so some keys weren't playing out of time with the rest of them and stuff. Sometimes you do want a natural feeling, but with a pad I think it works well either way. I just put a compressor on it. Some notes were louder than others, so I just compressed it a little bit. And then the EQ is just all subtractive EQ. So I took out everything below 100 Hertz. I took out a little bit of the 200 Hertz range purely because that part tends to muddy up the mix. And then I basically just went through and found frequencies that I didn't like. There's a little bit, I don't like that frequency very much, so I took it out and I did the same for 2 extra sections. Next I added RC20, which is a go-to of mine. It's probably one of the best plugins for adding like this vintage texture to your sounds and stuff. So this is what the pad sounds like with all the plugins on it, compared to without the plugins. And next I went with the lead, which was one of the one-shots. So I put it into the stock Logic sampler. It's the fuzzy Prophet lead, and this is what the lead sounds like with no effects on it. And then I added a compressor, 2 different EQs, some subtractive EQ here, but some of the frequencies were still harsh on the ear, so I did this big swoop on the high mids. Then I added RC20 again, added cassette first generation. So here's what it sounds like with everything. Compared to without. The effects are really just to add texture and take away certain frequencies that I don't like. Apart from that, I mean, they're fairly similar to how they come, just personal preference to how you want them to sound at that point. And then I added these keys that are playing the same notes the whole way through. And all I did was add subtractive EQ again, and then vinyl for RC20, but I took out the noise because I've already got the noise coming through the pad. I don't want 2 fake vinyl crackles happening at the same time. The key I used was Give Me a Sign, And then next I added this vocal sample. I time stretched it because the vocal sample was like, I think 150 or something. So I time stretched it to fit 140. And then I chopped it up slightly. Added a slight fade in as well to each vocal hit. These two here are actually together in the main vocal loop, but I split them up just because I thought it sounded better with the beat. Then what I added to it was Pan Man, so it was going side to side at like a moderate speed, and a lot of reverb as well, because I think it just adds to the ambience and it makes it more in the background and less up front in the mix. So altogether those sound like... I added a synth bass which goes along with the pad, so every time the synth bass stops playing I take the pad out. I just think it adds some empty space which makes the beat sound more interesting. And the synth bass I used was the BA Fat Sub 2, which is basically my go-to synth bass, which sounds good with every dark trap beat that I've made. I don't think there's ever been a beat that the sub bass doesn't work with without the effects that I put on it. And then I added a compressor, EQ, some R bass, which just, it helps like certain frequencies like cut through the mix, I found, to make that bass stand out a bit stronger. There's some like bassy RC20 presets that I think sound good with some synth basses. And then I added an S1 imager just to make it a bit wider, so it sounds a bit fuller and less mono. That's it for the melody and the synth bass. Now the drums are all from the Layers pack. All together they sound like this. The 808 is very simple. It's just following the root note of the pad, and it's just, the rhythm is... And I like my drums to be like fairly like repetitive. Once I find that certain rhythm that I like, I'll tend to just keep repeating it because I like the bounce of it. I basically switched it to mono. The Zay 808 is like a staple amongst trap, but I like the sound of Zay 2 as well. And I added compressor and EQ, which is mainly subtractive, but with a slight increase here, and R bass as well. And then next we got the kick. And then the kick I'm using is Friend of Zay. And then I added a compressor and EQ, which is, it's a subtractive EQ with a slight peak at the 200 hertz, because that's where the punch in the kick tends to be. And then next I've got the snare, and this is what it sounds like with nothing on it. And the snare I used was the cheetah snare. I added EQ to it. I took out a fair amount of the low, basically all of the lows, but there's still some of the mids in there, so it isn't too thin. And then I added a compressor as well. And then next I added two perks. The first one is the dry perk. The second one is the halt perk. They're basically the same as what I did to the snare, slightly different EQ. And then next we got the hat. The hat I used is the bottom hat. It sounds like this. I added reverb to it as well. This is what it sounds like without the EQ as well. I took out basically everything except the highs, and altogether that sounds like this. So yeah, that's the first beat I made with mainly just using the Loner layers pack apart from the synth bass. And if you've made it this far into the video, I just want to shout out my own music, and the link to that will be in the pinned comment and the description. And basically I've recently released a new 9-track mixtape with a friend of mine. So if you want to give that a listen, if you like how this beat sounds, you'll probably like the beats on the mixtape as well. Each track on that mixtape is like a different vibe, so there's bound to be something that you like. Each song has a different tone to it, a different feel, but we're also rapping about funny stuff, so don't take what we say too seriously in the mixtape. But the music's still hard though, so give it a listen, and yeah, I'll see you in future videos, which I probably plan to make. So yeah, see ya.